Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Sunday morning, taking an early look at Conference Championship Week, heading out to the Big Ten, Iowa, Michigan, meeting in Indy. Still, a game Michigan coming off a massive win against Ohio State, and Iowa sitting there at 10-2. Still some struggles on the offensive side of the football, but when you play defense like the Iowa, you're going to leave yourself in a lot of opportunities to win football games. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys. The amount of support for all of these game breakdowns, it's truly been amazing. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Picks, predictions, keys to the game. Still going to give you the T-box here. Iowa, Michigan, Big Ten Championship. How we feeling?
And obviously, you don't need to look much further than what this game total is and what the spread is, with Michigan favored by over 21 points, to kind of say that, like, Michigan clearly is the better football team. But I will say, every time Michigan's come off this Ohio State win, or at least for the past 2 years, they have started slow in these Big Ten title games. They started slow last year against Purdue, and they started slow 2 years ago against Iowa. And Iowa really isn't that team you want to kind of get into a gutted battle with at the end, because you're right. They play really good defense, and yeah, they don't score a ton, but they get that one takeaway kind of thing. They can transform a game.
That is exactly what you want to avoid against a team like Iowa. And Iowa, the best team in the country, kind of dragging that game into the mud, making it a little sloppy, making it a slow game. Now, the one thing that you're optimistic about for Michigan is they are very much capable of winning that caliber of game too, or that kind of game where it is a little mucky, where it is physical, because this is the most physical Michigan team we have seen. But that is exactly what Iowa's going to try to do. Really excited to see if they can do it. I want to take a look at this Michigan offense going up against an Iowa defense. I said it last week. I'll say it again. Death Taxes and Phil Parker just putting out an Iowa defense that's elite, right? You look at the numbers, they're only allowing 12.2 points per game. That's fourth in the country. Only 3.9 yards per play. That's number 2 in the country. And Dill, we watched that Iowa-Nebraska game this Friday, and you just watch this Iowa team. They're down their All-American cornerback in Cooper. They're just really well coached. Nothing comes easy against an Iowa defense. And Michigan, at the end of the day, is going to have to make plays to move the ball and score points on this Iowa defense.
Well, and that's the thing. Iowa just doesn't really make any mistakes. When you play Iowa, you need to be ready to essentially play 8+ play drives and do it really well each of your 8 plays. Because, again, A, they'll capitalize on your mistakes, and B, they're not going to give you anything easy. So, like, it's just hard to play that way, I think, a lot of times for offensive teams, is to, like, can you complete 10+, 8+ plays of high level execution?
They said this on the broadcast, kind of going what you were saying. 16 plays of 20+ yards all year for the Iowa Hawkeyes. I mean, there are teams in the country that give that up in a game. And so, like, hitting those chunk plays, hitting those explosive plays is extremely hard against an Iowa team that tackles really well, that doesn't blow coverages. And that's what I'm most intrigued with. Iowa's really tough against the run, right? Only giving up 3.1 yards per carry to opposing running backs. They got 2 really good linebackers in Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins, who always seem to be making plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. Michigan throwing the football. How do you do that against Iowa? Again, elite numbers. Only giving up a 54% completion percentage, 5 yards per pass attempt, both top 5 marks in the country. The story of this game is JJ making some of those throws that are NFL caliber throws. Because when you're trying to push the ball down the field against an Iowa Hawkeye defense, you have to fit it into tight windows. I think what you feel most excited about, we saw JJ do exactly that against Ohio State yesterday, again, in the game, I should say.
And he is coming off, in my mind, the best game he's played when you're adjusting for level of competition and in what the moment was. I mean, what he did was very impressive. That throw to Roman Wilson, huge throw. In what he was able to do with his legs as well, that's like the type of game. If he plays like that, Michigan's really hard to beat. I don't see a world that Iowa beats Michigan if he plays that game. It will be about not having like a performance like the Maryland game or something like that, where you make those crucial mistakes, because that's That's really the only way Iowa.
That's the way I 100% agree. That's the way you keep Iowa in this game, is not scoring touchdowns in the red zone, having those turnovers in the red zone. If JJ stays away from that, I mean, this is a Michigan team that can move the ball against anyone. And you said it best. Like, a lot of people who box score watch this will say, oh, JJ had an average game, right? Only threw for 140. He was 16 of 20 and barely threw an incompletion in the second half of that game, was extremely sharp. And when you watch the game, some of the caliber of throws that he had to make, that is championship level quarterback play from JJ McCarthy. Dill, get into a few concepts that I think could work for Michigan that I really liked. One, challenging that middle of the field, because these Iowa linebackers, they're really good at stopping the run. They're aggressive stopping the run. You get those RPOs working at the Colston Loveland over the middle of the field. One, I think Loveland's emerging as that guy. I mean, he had 5 catches on 5 targets, all of which were for first downs, a couple critical ones. The other thing I really liked that we hadn't really seen from Michigan much before this game, those little sprint outs to Roman Wilson, where you send him in motion, you get him to the perimeter. He's the fastest player on the field. If there's one advantage Michigan has in this game, it is team speed. Iowa's really good, right? But Michigan is faster on the perimeter. Can you go back to those concepts, get Roman Wilson, get Samaj Morgan the football in space, and let them kind of go make plays? I think could be a really beneficial look for the Michigan Wolverines in this one.
And that's something Iowa really hasn't seen all year, because there's not a team that they've played. If you don't really see Ohio State or Michigan right now, or maybe Merritt League, you really don't see really high-level guys on the edge who can make those big-time plays. And you're right. Roman Wilson's really emerged into that guy who is very much so that type of weapon that I think Michigan's been missing for a long time, especially on the edge. And you kind of noticed it in that Maryland game. When he was out, the offense did look different. So he is a big weapon. And that was like what I think most Michigan, at least me, was very impressed with, is they were able to use him in some of those other guys very effectively against Ohio State, where the past 2 games you really didn't get to see enough of that. A little bit against Penn State with Samaj Morgan making some plays, but I'm with you. I like the idea of Michigan going to some of that a little more than just pounding their head into the wall, kind of trying to run it over and over and over. I like being able to mix it up.
And I like get it's Michigan's identity to run the football. It sets a lot of stuff up in the passing game too. So you hear a lot of fans critical of the amount of times Michigan runs the football, 60% of their offensive snaps. That's 12th most in the country. At the end of the day, I think Sharon Moore has even said in his press conference, like, sometimes you recognize you're only going to get 2 yards, 2 or 3 yards, and it's not going to be an explosive play. You do it enough, you eventually pop that one to Blake Corum for 22 yards. But more importantly, that's what sets it up in the passing game, right? Working those play actions, working those RPOs, sucking up those linebackers and safeties. And will Michigan have a ton of success running the football against Iowa that's really good in the front 7? We're not sure. Maybe not. But eventually they'll be able to get something going in that passing attack that's worked off the run game. They'll flipping sides. The Iowa offense, the story of the Big Ten West this year. You take a look at the numbers. 18 points per game, that's 120th in the country. Only 4 yards per play, that's 132 in the country. My problem with this Iowa offense that you haven't had quite as many problems in years past, and I think that's why the offense has come under such heavy fire, is they don't have that identity. Like previous years, Iowa was not putting up 40 points per game. That's never been this offense. But they were able to run the football, control the time of possession, play that Iowa style of winning football games. You look at this year, they're only averaging 3.5 yards per carry. That is 109th in the country. You look at this Iowa offense, yes, what is their identity? And you're just not sure if they have one.
And that's the fundamental issue. I think for the past 2 years, they really haven't had great offensive line play and a great rushing attack. And you just notice that when they don't have that, they're just not built to play very good offense at all. And that's essentially what's happened. And you look at like the Penn State game, they really played pretty good defense for the most part, but they're putting into them in such horrible positions by their offense that at the end of the day, that's a pretty significant blowout at 31-0. And that has been the problem. Like this offense is just doing the defense a disservice. It's been occurring for about 10 years, like 5 years or so now. And you're right. When they don't run the ball, and they really haven't this year. It's tough, and obviously going up against a Michigan front that's been just unbelievable against the run.
In Michigan only allowing 3.1 yards per rush. That's 8th in the country. You look at the defense as a whole, 10.3 points per game. That's 1st in the country. This Michigan defense has been absolutely phenomenal. I think there's an argument that Michigan just saw the best running back in the country in Travion Henderson and held him for under 100 yards on 24 carries, I believe he had. I mean, the interior of the defensive line is elite, but I think the story of this Michigan team is that edge position. I mean, whether it's Derek Moore, Josiah Stewart, Jalen Harrell, Braden McGregor, I mean, those guys not only are getting after the passer, but they are so stingy in the run game. And you look at some of the keys for Michigan against this Iowa offense. You stop the run on 1st and 2nd down. You force Iowa into those 3rd and long situations where they're dropping back. 1, the offensive line has not been great in pass protection. And 2, Deacon Hill in this Iowa offense has not shown the ability to push the football down the field. You look at the passing numbers, a 49% completion percentage. That's 130th. For only 5.1 yards per pass, that's 132nd. Caleb Brown, he got banged up in the Nebraska game. Really the one dangerous weapon for Iowa in that passing attack. You look at the receivers in this passing game, getting separation against the Michigan secondary that I thought played a phenomenal game against Ohio State. It's really hard to find Iowa having that much success through the air here.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, at the end of the day, I think everyone knows that they're not going to move the ball a whole lot. The only chance Iowa has is to kind of do what we kind of said at the outset. It is to get this game into the 4th quarter, have it close, and hopefully you can make a big special teams play or defensive play. Because, just looking at the offense, there's really no answer. You see Eric All still the leading receiver for Iowa. He hasn't played in, I don't know how many games.
Yeah, 6 weeks.
So, that is an unacceptable stat line, essentially. The fact that you can't get one wide receiver to catch more than 300 yards in a 11-game season, it's just you can't play offense doing that. They haven't been able to do it, and I don't see how they do that against Michigan, being one of the top defense in the country.
All right, getting into the pick here. Sounds like both of us believe Michigan's going to win. Dude, that line's a lot of points, man. And I have I'm a Michigan guy, but I have a rule that I don't really bet against Iowa when they're catching 3 touchdowns. I'm going to ask you first, Michigan 22-point favorites in Indy. How are we feeling there?
I kind of think at the end of the day, Michigan's going to pull away just because I think Iowa's offense has kind of hit a new level of ineptitude that I don't think we've seen. And if you can't possess the football at all, which they can't, you can't move it at all or at least score. You hit a big play, can't really do that either. I think at the end of the day, Michigan's going to pull away from this football game. 22 points is a lot, but when you play at the level of offense they play at, and they do have some injuries in the defense, especially in the secondary, that I think, Nebraska probably couldn't totally take advantage of it. They obviously hit the one big play, but I think Michigan's pretty well equipped to just move the ball enough to put 30 points up, and if they hit 30, they easily cover this point spread.
I'm going to ride with Michigan too. And for a lot of the same reasons you said, a couple things. One, Iowa's not moving the ball consistently against Michigan. I think this is outside of Penn State, in which they scored 0 points. This is the best defense Iowa has seen. And then 2, Michigan's offense is much better than anything Iowa's seen. All right. I mean, you saw Penn State scored 30. Michigan's offense blows that Penn State offense out of the water. I think they're more athletic on the outside. I think Michigan can do a lot of different things to put this Iowa defense in conflict. And I'm not necessarily saying that Michigan is just going to run up and down the field against an Iowa defense, but I am saying that I think Michigan can do some things. This is by far the best quarterback Iowa has seen as well. That puts Iowa in a lot of conflict. I'm with you. I'm going to take Michigan to cover the 22 points. It's going to be a fun one. And a lot of people don't appreciate Iowa. I love watching their defense. I really do think this is one of the most well-coached, developed units that you see across the country. Michigan, I think, continues to roll into the college football playoffs. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.